Hello. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us at our 13th Salem Literary Festival. I'm Stephanie Buck, a member of the team of Salem Athenaeum staff and volunteers who bring you this festival each year. I'm very pleased to introduce this session, Cozy Up Comfort Reads. Before I introduce our authors, I want to give you a quick overview of how this works. We've pasted our anti-harassment policy at the top of the chat so you know the rules up front. We don't anticipate any problems, but we also want you to know how important it is that everyone feels safe. Most of you are Zoom experts by this point, so just a few quick tips. Please put your questions in the Q&A and we'll do our best to answer them after our panelists have finished their conversation. Any other comments can be put in the chat, though we appreciate it keeping to a minimum to avoid distracting the authors. If you'd like to use closed captioning, just click on the box that says CC at the bottom of your screen. And now on to our guests. Our moderator, Caroline Levitt, is the New York Times and USA bestselling author of Cruel, Beautiful World, Is This Tomorrow, Pictures of You, Girls in Trouble, Coming Back to Me, Living Other Lives, Into Thin Air, Family, Jealousies, Lifelines, and Meeting Rosie Halfway. Many of her titles were optioned for film, translated into different languages, and condensed in magazines. A New York Foundation of the Arts Fellow, she was also shortlisted for the Maine Readers Prize and was a Goldenberg Fiction Prize winner. She founded the Nothing is Canceled virtual book tour, an initiative she started when the pandemic began. It quickly grew, and she and novelist Jenna Blum co-founded A Mighty Blaze, which promotes independent bookstores, authors who lost their tours, and helps readers. Gina Sorrell graduated with a distinction of UCLA Extension Writers Program. Gina is the author of Wise Women, a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice, and a Good Morning America Buzz Pick, People's Magazine Best New Book, Today's Show Read with Jenna, and Parade Magazine Most Anticipated Book of 2022. Her debut novel, Mothers and Other Strangers, was a great group read selection and a 2017 Best Book of Refinery 29 and The Self magazine. Originally from Johannesburg, Gina has lived in New York and Los Angeles and now lives in Toronto with her husband and son. Gina balances the solitary hours of fiction writing with work as a creative director and brand storyteller under the banner of her own agency, Words Make the Brand. And last but not least, Weike Wang is the author of Chemistry and Joan is Okay. She is the recipient of the 2018 Hemingway, a Whiting Award, and a National Book Foundation 5 Under 35. Her work has appeared in Plowshares and The New Yorker, among other publications. She is in the 2019 Best American Short Stories and O. Henry Prizes. She earned her MFA from Boston University and her other degrees, a bachelor's in chemistry and a doctorate in epidemiology from Harvard. She currently lives in New York City and teaches at the University of Pennsylvania, Barnard College, and Columbia University. Welcome to all of you. And with that, I'll let you take it away.
Hi, I'm Caroline Levitt. First, I want to really thank Stephanie Buck for moderating this, and Jean Marie, I'm going to forget her last name. I'm so sorry. And also the Salem Lit Festival for this wonderful, wonderful festival. I'm thrilled to be here with Weike Wang. I loved her book, Joan is Okay. Gina Sorrell. I loved her book, The Wise Women. And I also want to point out a fun fact that Gina and I were both finalists in the Sundance Screenwriters Lab for a pilot we wrote called Ground Up. So today we're going to be talking about these three books. And I always ask a first question, which is, why this particular book? What was haunting you? Or what did this book mean to you? This is my book, With or Without You. And this book, what was haunting me was my own feelings about how we transform, both in relationships and with ourselves. And the book began as a result of a coma I was in 26 years ago, where I began to investigate comas. And I learned that people can come out of a coma actually better. So I want to get to the other authors. So Gina, how about you tell us why this book? Why? What does it mean to you? Why The Wise Women?
Well, I think the reason that this book was so important to me to write at the time that I wrote it too is that all the women in the book are going through a really enormous change in their life, a whole moment of upheaval. And at the time, I too was going through a really big change in my life. And so everything was pivoting. Work was pivoting. There were things happening in my family life that were pivoting. And I think like for a lot of people who have just are coming out of the pandemic, suddenly the future didn't look anything like I thought it would. And I really wanted to explore that and think about what happens in those moments, who do we lean on, and how do we move forward?
What about you, Waiki?
Great. So my book is Joan is Okay. And it's in a medical setting. Caroline, I didn't know that book, That Coma, was based on an experience.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I'm laughing now.
I was like,
It's
wow.
not so funny back then.
Because when I was reading, I was like, wow, this is a really creative way to think about this. And I was like, that's a very important experience. So when I was thinking of Joan, I think Joan came to me as this character that I was just interested in exploring a little bit more. She's an Asian American female physician, and I was interested in giving her the lead in the story. Oftentimes, I feel like a character like her is often marginalized. She sort of has this type. She sort of is placed as maybe has there's kind of a lot of qualities that go with her that are stereotyped, and I really wanted to explore that sort of character and give her give her a narrative, give her the story, and I think sort of in overlapping in both of yours, it's kind of the experience of grief, the kind of experience of loss, right? And figuring out what happens when you lose something that you think you would never lose. And for Joan, it's her father at the beginning, and that launches the story, and now Joan has to navigate new waters. So part of loving someone is having to grieve them afterwards or during. And that was something that also occupied me with this character.
Yeah, they always say that grief is proof that you loved.
Yeah.
This is it's a lovely way to think of it. I also want to talk about all of our novels throw the reader into professions, so to speak. I was really interested in writing about both a female nurse and a female doctor. First, because I find it so fascinating, and also because when I was in the hospital for 3 months, once I got out of coma, the nurses were my friends. I mean, I got to know them really well, male and female nurses, and they were the ones who always came in and sat with me for hours, where the doctors were more interested in me as a medical oddity.
You were a case.
I was a case. I was only in the medical books. Gina, you wrote a whole lot about real estate and about branding and all this kind of stuff. Talk about that in relationship to your characters.
So, I mean, these are two of my obsessions. I am obsessed with real estate. I come by that obsession naturally.
I'm also obsessed with real estate. I also, the first line of your book was about, the house. And I was like, of course.
Real estate is big.
It is big. I think, my family, they're involved in real estate. My mom and my sister were both agents. My family has also worked in construction, like as contracting work. But really, I think, going deeper than all of that, apart from my love of looking at other people's homes, is this idea of finding home, and as someone who also I wasn't born in this country, when we came over, that was a really big change for my family coming from Johannesburg. My dad wasn't born in Johannesburg. My dad was born in Europe, and he traveled all over before going to Johannesburg. My family wasn't originally from Johannesburg. They'd come over from Russia, parts of them. So this idea of finding a home, finding a place, belonging, that sense of security, I think was something that was much deeper under that real estate obsession. But real estate is just so delicious and a nice way in for all of us that I thought it was a great history. And it justified my endless hours spent looking on people's Redfin and Zillow and all of that.
It's an addiction, like the scrolling through these pictures. And
it really is. Try having your mother also sending you listings because she knows.
Real estate is aspirational. I told Gina that my office looks right out on this house. It's a $3.5 million house that these people built. It has an elevator inside, a plunge pool, 5 stories, 5 bathrooms. And the most horrific thing about it is, this is a city and there's little urban backyards. Their backyard has like a little patch of astroturf and the rest is concrete.
Caroline, I think we need to change horrific to wonderful, because you're going to get an invitation and then I'm going to come over and Yeah, and then the branding part of it is just about how we package things, right?
Right.
We have the real estate.
Right.
This is the type of person. This is this type of home. This is this type of life that we're selling. This is this type of idea that we're saying that we belong to, you know. And having worked in branding as a namer and then also a brand storyteller for years, so much of that story that we tell people, you know, I'm always curious how much of that's real, how much of that is to sell.
Right. Right. Waikiki, Joan is a doctor. She's super
Yeah.
smart,
But
but who she is, who people think she is not really who she is, which is one of the things that I loved about the book, because she has all these layers. Can you talk about that, please? And how her profession both informs her and disguises who she really is in some ways.
Well, kind of thinking about both the points that you mentioned, you know, Caroline, with the writing about medical occupations, I generally find people in medicine, it's an all-consuming job, right?
Yes.
Because it's so around the clock. The hospital kind of becomes this makeshift family, especially during times like a pandemic. You're spending more time there than you are elsewhere. And to Gina's point about finding a home, for Joan, that home is her occupation. And that home is the hospital that she's working in, the cases that she's working on, her floor that she kind of has control over. I think in some ways, you know, purchasing a home, you have some sort of control over that plot of land, right? What you can do in that space. And with Joan having, you know, when she's the attending on that floor, she kind of has control pretty much over that space of how the care is going to be run, what the nurses are doing, what the techs are doing. And that gives her a sense of security. And really, when you're looking for a sense of belonging and home, security is one of the biggest ones. So that was something I was trying to get at for her. I think to an outsider, she probably is this, you know, mono-minority workaholic type that doesn't have a soul. And that's the complete opposite character I wanted to paint with her, is that I wanted to give her the sense of she does have a soul, but obviously to become so good at this job that she feels a sense of belonging, there are certain, you know, she can't spend, I don't know, hours of her life like learning how to knit or something like that. You know, she can't have 500 different other hobbies.
Right.
Can't be a complete social butterfly that she just drops her shift and then goes and goes to a rooftop terrace, you know, during happy hour, which is sometimes what I do. So I think for Joan is the sense of she needs to kind of have a certain personality to make that her home. And that comes at maybe a sacrifice to a lot of people of, oh, her personhood, her personality. But in the end of the day, I wanted to paint a picture of a character who is content and very happy with how she got there. And it might not be the trajectory that everyone else wants to do, but you know, if we're in the hospital, I think if Joan's our doctor, right, we would want Joan to be sort of
yes, absolutely.
And just very, very reliable. That's what we want from these kind of professions. And Joan is actually naturally drawn to that sort of profession.
I wanted to build on that answer and talk a little bit about female identity, because both Gina and I have characters in our books who are sort of undone by their male partners. In my book, Stella is a very practical nurse, and she's been with this once famous rock and roller for a long time, and she's had to sort of sublimate a lot of her desires to his schedule, and she's sick of it. And then she becomes the coma person, and when she wakes up, she has a different personality. And what actually can happen, she has this startling new talent, which gives her the fame that her male partner has always wanted and never gotten, and she gets. And in Gina's book, you have the same basic thing where you have a female character she's the breadwinner. She thinks she owns her house, which is a key thing in the novel. She's a terrific mother. She's trying to balance everything. And her husband, I don't want to give anything away, but her husband.
No, it's okay. It's
okay.
right.
Her husband has, the house no longer belongs to them because of her husband and his weird dreams. And yet both of these characters, my character Stella and Gina's character, managed to rise up and become better and stronger. And of course, Joan is also, a really strong character. I loved what you said, Waikiki, that she, who she is may not be who anybody else wants to be, but it's so right for her. And I think that's why I loved her so much. So Gina, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was also gonna say, I love how, with Waiki, just with your character, you're saying that it might not be right for everybody, but I love how she's, defined by her work, and her work also defines her. Like, I loved how
Right.
there's that real partnership with them, right? It's not like, oh, the work was keeping her down, or if only she, was preventing her from doing what she really wanted, which I thought it was really important to see that she was okay being the way that she is in her life. And I think that was really nice to see. Somebody who often gets accused of being a workaholic. I personally really liked that.
Me too.
I'm not. I just
Waiki.
love my work. I just love my work.
And Waiki, do you have anything else to add beside the fact that Joan is definitely her own woman, and
Well,
perhaps she's always been her own woman?
I mean, I think in all of our books, the women are there's a lot of environmental pressures, right? Male pressure, what control of certain things, but also these women are also, they have work, they have things that they need to do, right? They have occupations, they have desires, they have ambitions. These women aren't just sitting around at a window staring out, and not doing anything, right? And I do think that's important to highlight, that a lot of times when we're writing, when I'm writing, I'm thinking about, if I'm writing this, protagonist, I'm also thinking about what is their job, what are they gonna do,
Right.
Like Wendy Wise, she writes advice, and it's kind of the sense of, there's an irony in that, right? With Joan, she's so preoccupied with care. She doesn't always think about her own self-care, right? So there's a sense of, being defined by work, and the work defining you in kind of an ironic, and sometimes we're blinded by that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this panel is actually called Comfort Reads. And when I first saw that, I thought, really? And I started to, because all of these novels have harrowing aspects, and they're all really about grief. And yet all of them have, there's a kind of delight in reading. I was delighted reading Gina's book, and I was delighted reading about Joan. And the more I read about her, the more I loved her. And I think part of the comfort might have to do with the fact that, characters can go through terrible and traumatic things and come out okay. It's like your title, Joan is okay, which really resonated for me. It's like, yes, she is. And yes, all of these women in these books are. So Gina, how would you, I see the comfort in your book very much in the ending. Where do you see it?
That's a good question. No, for me, these women their whole lives are changing, they're in pivot, but they're not like in peril. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like the problems were relatable, but nobody had been kidnapped. There wasn't anything their lives were in peril. They were dealing with stresses, I think, that we can all relate to. But I was hoping that with the humor that I placed in there, and that sense of self-awareness that these characters have of themselves, maybe not all the time, but hopefully they get a little bit more as it goes on, or at least that the reader has of them, that would give the reader that permission to laugh with them, maybe not at them, but really close to it, like really next to them, and see the humor in that, and be able to relate to it, but not, they would be invested, but they wouldn't be necessarily incredibly worried. You'd worry, but there'd be a sense of trust and a sense of hope that things could work out. Maybe not the way they wanted it to, but it wasn't an all is lost completely scenario. So I think in that way, it's comforting that there's some lightheartedness, that there is some humor, and there's, hopefully this, the fact that these events that sort of kind of work out sometimes, or these strange coincidences, that playfulness within the book would allow them to have comfort.
Right. I love what was it called? It was like a vegetable sparkling drink.
Oh, it's Aquaveg.
Aquaveg, yes.
Sparkling carbonated vegetable water startup that he steals Clementine's money for.
God.
I used to work for Gina for her naming company.
Well, we worked together.
So
what is this? The name?
Oh, it's great.
We both have done naming, and it's funny. Sometimes you get like the most strangest products to name. Someone is like, I have this dog food that gives the dog, super minty breath. But
so what are you going to call it? And it's a very funny, it's a very, very funny job.
Yeah.
So Waiki, talk about I mean, I think the comfort aspect in your book is Joan realizing that she is okay.
Right,
We've
right.
gotten through this time.
Right.
What else can you say about that?
But sometimes with comfort reads, for me at least, when I'm thinking about a comfort read, with Gina's book, it's like, wow, these characters are kind of in a mess, and that sometimes makes me feel a little bit better about my life, because I'm like, well, at least that's not happening, right? Or Carolyn, with your brother, like, at least I'm not in a coma and I didn't wake up. Right? There's a sense of
It's very comforting.
yeah, it's comforting that it does not get this bad. And with Joan, right, her life really starts to unravel from page 1
Right.
until at the end she's kind of punished by not being able to work. Her biggest joy, which is working, is kind of removed from her. And I think if I just started out with that story for a regular reader, they'd be like, well, isn't that just vacation? You go on vacation if you don't want to work, right? Or something like that. And I wanted the reader to really connect with this character who, to lose her father and to lose her work, she's really suffering sort of this like double loss. And in some ways, I want the reader to kind of empathize with this character, and also want to feel that I do want to comfort her, right? Kind of feel that connection.
Right.
And I think that's also what a comfort read is that
That's right.
the characters get into such messes that you really you're pulling for them. You're pulling for just some sort of normalcy in their life to return. And you really celebrate the small victories, right? Just waking up, right? A small victory.
That is a small victory. That's right. Getting through the day. I just thought of another surprise question for both of you. I loved your characters so much, and I was wondering, Gina, where do you see your characters in 10 years after the novel ends? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Quiz question.
No. I mean, I think that I think Wendy is probably back to being enormously successful in some other realm that she hadn't expected,
Right.
And it's probably something like Instagram, a channel that she has, or something like this,
Right.
or like TikTok, like something unexpected for Wendy in a woman her age, that she'll be like a TikTok sensation.
Wendy on TikTok. Wow.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. And then, and for Clementine, the mom, I think that she's doing really well in her business and has her own voice. And I think that she, it's interesting because there's a bit of romance there with another character, and people are like, oh, did they end up together? I'm not sure. I mean, I think she's going to be I think she'll have romance, but I don't know if she'll live with anyone again. Like, I think she has a really great thing with Jonah, and that is her focus, her son. So I see her running her own business, and more financially.
Well, her son will be a teenager by then, right?
Yeah. What's Jonah doing?
Right,
what's Jonah doing in 10 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's Jonah
doing in 10 years?
Oh, Jonah in 10 years. Well, yeah, I mean, Jonah in 10 years is, I think he's probably applying to universities early, if he's not already. He's finishing his first year, probably.
Okay.
Right?
And what about her husband? What about Clementine's husband?
Oh, yeah. I think he's going to be on a speaking tour with a bunch of self-published books that he's done on how to realize your dream. Like, he's going to sort of,
his comeback tour. His
comeback tour. Yeah. Maybe if he's lucky to get the
I
podcast.
love it. That's really funny.
Maybe. And I think that Barb, I think that Barb is really settled, and she's probably working much more in like things that she really loved, which is sustainable housing and that. But because it's Barb, she would have done something like also sold her company to a massive developer for a fortune, so now she can do these smaller projects. And it's still with Joe.
Mikey, how's Joan? How's Joan 10 years later?
I mean, honestly, she is probably doing the exact same thing. She's a very consistent person. With Joan, it's one of these characters who, if she could write her book, nothing would happen, right? Nothing floors the plot. Every day is the same. But I imagine by then, during that time, I think at the end of the book, she reconnects with her brother and her mother more, and I think she will probably start to think about, how do I make myself a better aunt to my nephews, right? How do I make my mother's getting older? How do I visit her more often, right? Having this awareness that it's not just home is the hospital, but sense of they will, even though we don't agree on everything, they will always welcome me if I wanted to come, and sort of having a sense of, making that effort instead of kind of shrinking away into her house and then
Right.
going to work. So I'm hoping she will be a pretty good aunt in 10 years.
I
They will
hope
also
that
be older. The kids will also be, applying to
Yeah.
college, teenagers.
I hope that Joan will have coffee with me someday. So all of us have written other novels. So I want to ask, because I always want to know, because this is never this way for me. Once you write a novel and you've figured out all the problems, do you feel that those answers help you write your next book? Or do you feel like every book is a new book? For me, every book is a new book, and it's always the same sort of terror. And that I think I should have gone to dental school instead of being a writer. I don't know how to do this. Gina, do you feel that way? I mean, do you feel like one book is a progression of the next, or?
No, I mean, I've just the question makes me collapse. No, because I'm still trying to figure out, I'm still trying to get better at my own process.
Okay.
It's kind of knowing what my weak spots are, and so I try to get a bit better with them, and then knowing my blind spots are and trying to improve on that, and also just the reality of so in some ways, yes, because I have more awareness of how I work, so I feel like that makes the process easier. But I also I still find it as challenging, because that awareness also reminds me of what I need to do, which keeps raising the bar. So it's like I get a little bit better, but then the bar goes higher and a little bit. So I always feel like I'm kind of trying to catch up and trying to make sense of it. I feel like I take a bag of marbles and I throw them out on the floor, and then I'm just trying to get them all back in and sort it out. I mean, I would love somebody else to look at my brain and explain to me how it works.
No, we don't know.
No.
Yeah.
But you use whiteboards, and
Oh.
you use
You do? You use
Post-it
whiteboards?
I'm tangible.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
I've tried programs, and you saw me try to get into the Zoom call. It's not a surprise that I can't do an online program. So, I have a physical whiteboard that I write on. And then I've also got cue cards that I write on, and I move them all over the place, and I'll print up parts of the outline. I've just started outlining, and and usually I would outline a bit afterwards. Now I'm trying to outline a little earlier, and then I would cut that up and tape it to my wall.
Yeah.
Where it is, like I'm tracking some mastermind. It's not my mind. I'm tracking my own mind, trying to figure it all out, where these threads are and how it connects.
But don't you also find out that even if you do an outline, which I do, it changes at least 17 times as you're going
constantly.
through, because things come out of the ether, or the
Constantly.
phone, as I like to change, and then you realize, oh, no, this should happen here. And if this happens here, then it changes everything at the end.
No.
And I mean, that's part of the insanity and the delight of the whole process.
Yeah.
Caroline, you've written a bazillion books. I mean, so what about you and your process? Yeah, tell us.
It changes, and it always changes. And when I first started my career, I did not outline, I did not show my work to anybody, because I was just too shy.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, one of my students at UCLA said, "Oh, have you heard about story structure?" And I said, "Come on, I'm not structuring anything. It's all the muse." And she said, "Well, I have these tapes for you, and maybe you'd like to listen to one." And I said, yeah. And she sent me these tapes, and I thought, what the hell am I going to do with these? But I listened to one because I'm a nice person. And the tape began to talk about all these things that I'd been thinking about, but I didn't know what to do about, like moral choices that people make, and how what you choose spins what you do, and how people have misconceptions about what they think they want, and how it's different from what they need. Sort of like the Rolling Stones song, you can't always get what you want, but when you struggle, you get what you need. And I thought, this is interesting, maybe I'll try that. So I tried it, and I was hysterical through most of the process because it was so freaking hard. But that gave me my first New York Times bestseller. So after that, I thought, great, I'll do this every time, and it'll be even easier. And of course, it was not. And I still do use structure. So Waiki, tell us about your process.
Well, I'm only on my third book, and I'll have a process. I feel the way I think about books is that it's sort of like albums. Madonna's albums, they're all kind of different, and you do something very different with the album. It's a piece of work, but it has to sound different. The voice has to be a little bit different. Obviously, maybe we're circling the same themes and ideas and whatnot, but as kind of a cohesive piece of art, they all have to vary a little bit, right? Joan was different from chemistry, and then the third one I'm writing, I'm trying to do third person, so taking a step back and writing a different type of story. I wish I could I don't outline very well, right? I start outlining, and then I feel like sometimes if I outline, it's so decided that I can't surprise myself anymore with the
A
story.
lot of people feel that way. I
Right.
don't think that's true though. Well,
I
at
don't
least
think
not
that's
for
true.
me.
I don't think that's true. Or I honestly just don't know what's going to happen. So sometimes I'm just sitting there, going back and editing and then moving forward. So I do write from just beginning to end, but it's not linear. It's I have to, when I don't know what's going to happen next, I just find myself at the beginning trying to figure some things out. It's very inefficient. I would say writing is incredibly inefficient.
Do you write every day, Mikey, or do you have a
I
specific
try
time?
to, but it's like very hard. I think it's
It's
very
really
hard to do that. Yeah.
What about you, Gina?
Well,
I know you do because I get emails from you every day.
Yeah. What's going on? Yeah, all my work emails. No, I think I do write every day now, but I didn't, and so I'm a mom, and my son is about to turn 11, and so that's changed a lot of it, right? So is that there was a time like when he was younger that I had to like fight, not like with him with anything, but I had to really carve out that like 2 hours on a Saturday morning where I like went to a coffee shop once a week. That was, and and my husband's also an artist. So that's a challenge is, we have these two sort of creative lifestyles. So that's gotten easier as he's gotten older and gotten more independence and been in school. So now I just feel so lucky that I can write every day, that I try to. But the interesting thing is I just want to say one point to that, your previous question about process is just how I think the biggest thing I've learned is time. I don't really know my structure. I don't really know my whole process as well, but I do know that I'm someone that needs time. And sometimes that's just time to think, or to get lost, or to not know what I'm doing, and to wander. And that is the biggest thing that I realized. I'm not a robot, that even if I'm writing every day, if I don't give myself some kind of unstructured time, I'm not going to move forward.
Yeah. Let's talk about writing tricks in revision. When I do revisions, the first thing I do is I print out my manuscript. I have different colored Post-its for every character. So I have a visual. If I have a manuscript and it's got 8 zillion orange Post-its and say 2 yellow ones, I know I've given the character short shrift. So what do you do? Like, what do you do, Mikey, when you're doing revision? What are some of your tips and tricks? Also, I want to encourage everybody out there, please ask questions. You can ask us anything and everything. I'm sure none of us have any shame at all. So we'll
no
answer
secrets. No, sure.
No secrets either. So ask.
My revision process is a lot of deletion. I think deletion, putting back in. I have usually 2 docs running when I'm working. I have the story, like the whatever masterpiece thing, and then I have like a discard doc where I put stuff in or I take stuff out. And I sort of have those 2 parallel docs running. So revision to me looks a lot like cutting things out, putting these back in, cutting it out again. And not overwriting, but not underwriting. I tend to find that balance for me hard to strike at the very beginning. Because for me, when I'm overwriting, I'm trying to explain to myself what the story is, because I don't know. I'm writing it out, but maybe, I don't know, draft 5, it doesn't matter that this character is a vegetarian, because I don't use that ever again. So we could just remove that. So it's a lot of those things, or it's like, why was I thinking that at that time? Maybe I was hungry. I don't know. So there's a lot of that sort of balancing. Yeah.
So I have another writerly question, which is, what advice would you give other writers? For me, the advice would be, no doesn't always mean no. Don't give up.
Don't give up.
And the reason why I say that is that I was a sensation for my first novel, and my next 8 novels were like It just bounced from publisher to publisher. And then on my 9th novel, it was rejected on contract by my then publisher as being not special enough. And
Wow.
they did not want to see anything else from me. So I knew that if you're on your 9th book and it's rejected and they don't want to see anything more, it's like I knew my career was totally over. So I spoke to a bunch of my writer friends and I cried and said, what am I going to do now? And what do I do? I'm just going to write for myself. And one of them had an editor at Algonquin, and she said, let me talk to the editor. And I said, fine. They're not going to want this. My sales are like this. So she talked to the editor, and the editor actually called me and said, I'm sort of interested in your book. Can you send it to me? And I said, really? I said, you really want to see it? She said, yeah, I do. So I sent it to her. She called me 4 days later and she said, we want to buy your book. And I said, wait. I haven't sold books since my first novel. And she said, well, you will now. And they took that book and they turned it into a New York Times bestseller its first week out. It went into like 7 different printings. But the best, most wonderful thing was that the editor who had rejected it as being not special called my agent and said,
Did they
"Would
actually
Caroline like
say
to come
that?
back?"
They said
Yep.
not
Yep.
special?
Yep.
Wow.
She called my agent and said, we'd really like to have Caroline come back. And my agent, of course, said no. So if you're a writer, do not give up, ever. Gina, what's your advice?
Caroline, I'm going to have to correct you on something. So,
right.
even though it's your personal story. So, I would also say, based on your advice, not to, like, what you've taught me to, is like not to compare, because you were saying that your books were like this, and nobody cared. And that is not true. That is simply like, I mean, it's for you, but your books are loved and adored and hugely successful. And you should feel proud about every single one of them. And I know that you do. But I mean, it's, you're being way too modest and hard on yourself. But I agree, not calling you special was a huge mistake. I would say also don't give up. Like, that's the thing. I mean, I was an actor before that I was a writer. And I think that really helped me is I had so much rejection, and it's the kind of rejection you can't do anything about. Like, we don't like your face, and you're like, well, this is my face,
Oh my gosh.
like just like things that you can't change about yourself. Like, you are who you are, and that's how you look, and this is it, right? You can't, that's it.
Right.
But with the work, there's something about it for me being able to go, oh, these are just, in the best way, when I'm in my most sort of like feeling confident, I mean, these are just words on a page. I can change them. Somebody doesn't like them. Big deal. Someone else will like them. I can move them around for this revision. I can make it better. It's all possible. So I think being able to, in any way, allows you to trick yourself into making it less personal, a step removed, is a really healthy thing to figure out what that is for you. And whether that's like listening to a bunch of people's stories about what they went through, or like whatever that is, or just saying, well, it's going to be 100 tries before someone says yes. Like, whatever you tell yourself to get through, I think is like, that's a healthy thing to learn early on.
Yeah.
What about for you, Mikey?
Not taking it personal. It's like easy to, sometimes it's just so hard it's so hard, especially when you're a writer, because a lot of your stuff goes on the page, like not as in like autobiographical stuff, but just like you're trying to explain something to yourself, but also to other people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's this clarity of story, and it's really hard to not take it personal. I think for me, honestly, is, I try not to read any sort of reviews afterwards, like the good, the bad. For me, it's actually, it just is, it makes me nervous, This is actually why social media has been kind of scary, because if, someone doesn't like your book or someone loves your book, they tag it, and it can be a little noisy.
Yeah.
I try to be very generous and say, thank you for reading my book. But sometimes, with so many opinions out there, it's like, don't read the comments page, right? Try not to take that so personally, because there's nothing you can do once the book is out there, and sometimes if I let the feedback change how I write, the next story sort of gets affected. So I think your advice is all great. Like, don't give up, don't take it personally. But even after the book is out there, maybe not take, whether it succeeds or whether it flops as sort of the sign of what the future is going to be like for you as a writer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think also that not all books are for all people. All you
Yeah.
have to do is think of the books that everybody loves, critically acclaimed, that sort of didn't feed anything in you.
Right.
And also, in terms of reviews, often a review will say more about a reviewer than the book itself.
Yeah.
I mean, I had one reviewer that actually told me that all writers have one book that should be burned. This
Wow.
might be yours. And
What?
but the thing is,
Oh.
but the thing is that I did research on the reviewer, and the book she was
Carolyn, you're very
maligning.
brave. I don't even think I could do that. Like, I think if I read that
No
line,
way.
No,
it'd
you
be
can't.
over.
So brave.
She was maligning a book about open adoption. And when I investigated who she was, I realized that she had an open adoption that had not gone very well. So the book just hit her the wrong way. It hit her the wrong way. And that's fine. I mean, I wish that it had not been public, but
Yeah.
it's sort of fine. Not all books. And the thing is that nowadays anyone can review anything. So you have all these people on Goodreads and
Yeah.
Barnes and Nobles and Amazon. And, it's nice to know you're read, but it's not so nice sometimes when you read things that aren't so great. And I just want to point out that I had one friend who broke off an engagement with this guy, and she was an author. And immediately afterwards, she had something like 72 awful reviews of her book because she had broken off the engagement. They
But
obviously
they were his friends.
they were his friends and his family, his mom, and they were all attacks on her character because she broke up the engagement. So I'm laughing, even though it's not really, really very funny, but it is sort of. So
But you're right, but it's not for everybody. You think
It's
about
not for everybody.
walk
That's
into
right.
a bookstore and based on the mood that you're in, you're like, like then maybe you pick one thing when there's so many things. Or I always like to say you sit down and you turn on the television and you scroll through the 3,000 choices and you're like, there's nothing to watch. I tell myself, what if that's a book? That's just somebody in that mood that day, right? Like,
it depends. It's what you like and what you don't like. I'm sort of interested when Gina was talking about being an actress and how that informed a lot of what she wrote. In fact, Gina's very first book that I read was about an actress becoming a writer. So I want to know, what other jobs have you had that informed your writers? And when you had to have other jobs for money or for whatever else, did you, like me, go for the monkey jobs where you didn't really have to think about what you were doing? It was just a paycheck. Or did you need a job that was also emotionally satisfying, likey?
So, I would say writing when it's going well, there's no better drug, to be honest.
Right.
When it's going well, it's it's the best drug. But when it's not going well, it is incredibly terrible. I was trained in the sciences, so there's a lot of in research, you're just very aimless. You start with this open water. You have no idea what you're looking for. You have no idea what the question is. You have no idea where you're going to end up. And that to me actually helped me a lot with writing, which is at the start of research, any scientist they're not given steps, right? They kind of have to create their own path. And oftentimes the path is so circuitous that, you might have wasted 4 months on something that once you know how to do it, you're like, oh, that would take a week now. And writing is a lot like that you spend 4 months trying to figure out a solution to a problem that once you realize it, maybe when you're on a walk and not even at the desk, it becomes very obvious. So in that way, being comfortable with the unknown, kind of before with, scientific research, helped me a lot with figuring out how to write, a story that is fiction that you have to kind of hang the hook somewhere.
Gina, I know how being an actress informed you as a writer and as a screenwriter too. Were there other jobs? I mean, do you approach your characters the way you would a character as an actress?
Yeah, I did. I mean, for me, it's I think being an actor for so many years really was just allowed me to study human behavior and motivations, right? And so I'm always into character first. Like the idea, Waiki, that you're just sort of heading into this void of unknown, not knowing what you're looking for, terrifying to me, like amazing and terrifying. For me, I have to have a voice. I have to have like one person, like one sort of hook, you know, and they have to, something that I'm sort of connected to. Not saying that you don't, but for me, it starts with a character, right? And that's my launching off point. And then I'll follow them into that unknown space. But yeah, it really allowed me to sort of examine people and understand them. And I think that's why I'm always drawn to things that are character based. Like, you know, I don't need like a giant, huge twist or some giant plot device.
Crashing cars.
Yeah, people are fascinating enough to me. Like they're endlessly fascinating. And so I want to follow them.
Okay, we actually have a question, and then I have a last question for all of you. Oh, we have two questions. What I wanted everybody to do before we were over is just tell us in like 1 or 2 sentences about your book again, so people can go to their favorite indie bookstore and buy it. And right after we do that, we have a question. Chloe wants to know where to start if she wants to start writing. And Margaret says, what advice do you have finding an agent for someone who writes in multiple genres? Okay, so there's like 3 questions for all of us to answer. So let's start with Waiki. Just 2 sentences about your book, and then where do you recommend Chloe starts writing? And what advice do you have about finding an agent who writes in multiple genres?
Okay, so about my book, it's about a character who can't help but be herself, but maybe that's not what everyone else wants her to be. So figuring out this character's journey through grief and through her current times.
And that's Joan is okay. That's the
Joan is
title.
okay. That is Joan is okay. So I am trying to, so with writing, how do you start? Well, you have to start with the first sentence, but I generally find the best advice I got was you sort of need to start at the conflict. So what is the conflict that you really want to write about? You're really interested in? Is it friends separated by something? Is it a marriage? Is it a parental relationship? So sort of get at the heart core. Is it war? Is it, buying a house? I don't know, like get that conflict down. About finding an agent, multiple genres, I would say, are there writers that you admire that write in multiple genres, and find who their agents are and think about if that's a good way
Good
to
advice.
Because a lot of agents are like, oh, if you're kind of like this person, they get a sense of what they're dealing with, what they might be interested in reading, and that's a good place to start.
Gina.
That was so good. That was so good and so fast.
I know, that was great. That was excellent.
This is my book. It's The Wise Women. It's the story of a meddling advice columnist mother and her 2 adult daughters. It's the Wise family, Wendy Wise, Clementine Wise, and Barb Wise. And it's about what happens when the rug gets pulled out from underneath you, and how do you pivot and face maybe a future that, while looks uncertain and not the one you expected, could turn out to be even better than you hoped.
Mm-hmm.
It's witty and it's comforting. No, I say that because I define a comfort read as something that I want to just get lost in. And so I think that's really interesting. It's not always a happy book. It's not always, that everything works out okay, but it's characters that I fall in love with. It's people that I want to follow. It's something that I feel comfortable reading because I'm enjoying spending time there. Mm. So that to me is a comfort read. And for some people, that's going to be things like thrillers. That's going to be comforting to them, but that would not be comforting to me. But, I like thrillers, but they terrify me. So, yeah. So, and for starting to write, I agree. You have to find the first sentence. For me, it's usually a voice. I start with a voice. I start with, who am I thinking of? Like, what are they trying to say? Where are they right now? What are they going through? And just really trying to narrow that down to like something just really present and small, rather than think the whole novel at once. What's it about? What am I trying to say? Like, it's usually just a line or a thought or an idea. And I agree, finding an agent is an excellent way, is like looking at other authors and who they're represented by, using things like Publishers Weekly or going to Publishers Marketplace or Agent Query. Those are all really great. And so many people now are doing, they're doing Zoom like meetings like this, and like webinars, and they're holding seminars where you get a chance to get a sense of what an agent is like and what they might be looking for.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, this is my book, With or Without You. It's about a couple in their 40s who have come to an impasse. And when the female partner goes into a coma, she comes out completely transformed, getting the fame that her partner still is desperate for. And she's not so sure she wants. Okay, how to start writing. Think of a book you want to read. Write the book you want to
Yeah.
read.
Oh,
And
wow. Yes.
in
Yeah.
terms of, what's obsessing you, what question is in your mind, write it. Be brave about it too. What advice about finding an agent? Poets and writers. Agentquery.com is a great kind of thing. And I think we are just about done.
That was such a good
I
answer.
wrapped it up.
That was great. Obsessions and the
Right.
voice in your head that you can't get out, right? Because that,
Right,
yeah.
right.
This has been such a fun conversation to listen into. Thank you
Oh, I'm so
so
glad.
much, Caroline, Waike, and Gina, for joining us.
Thank
Up
you.
next, we have a couple panels. So we start with an author at the festival with the YA Developing Mystery.
Mhm.
And also It's Complicated, Animals and Humans, which are happening concurrently at 3 p.m.
Mm.
And a final thanks to our audience. If you're interested, you can purchase our authors' books at Wicked Good Books here in Salem, Massachusetts, Copper Dog Books in Beverly, Massachusetts, or from your local favorite bookseller. Our festival is free for everyone every year and is possible due to your support. If you'd like to donate to the festival, please head to salemlitfest.org and click donate.
Okay.
And you can also go to salemlitfest.org to see what else we have going on for the rest of the day. Thank you so much. I appreciate
so
your
much.
time.
Oh, thank you for having us. This is an absolute
Thank you.
pleasure to be in discussion with you both, and I really loved it. Thank you so much.
This was wonderful. Now, Waike, you can hang out with Gina and me all the time.
Get us an invite across the way. Come on.
Well, I
yes.
want that name brand company. Let's start naming things.
Yes, let's start naming things. We'll name each other's next books.
Yeah.
Oh, good idea.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
great
you
afternoon.